All right, and we are live. I'm just going to wait a couple minutes here for a couple more folks to get on. Also going to share it to a couple of groups. One of the things that I've decided to do is when people are Angelic Magic students in my classes, I share the Patreon subscriber during the 2 months that they are in the class. They're given access to the member groups. And so moderator L, if you're listening, if you could share it to the Angelic Magic groups, I'd appreciate that. When that gets up, that'll be in the second half. And so we got about 7 folks listening, and I'm just going to go ahead and launch into this, get out of the way at the beginning. So we're going to be covering a lot of stuff today. We're going to be covering, we're going to be talking about the origin of the spirits known as the Fae, and their origin and evolution is extremely interesting. And as far as I know, nobody else talks about this. This is something that I've learned from Gnosis, from interacting with the Fae. I'm going to be talking a bit about the nature of the class of spirits known as elementals that were talked about first by Paracelsus in his mystical writings from, I believe he was alive in the 1500s. Don't quote me on that. And then I'm going to be talking about what I call true environmentalism versus modern environmentalism. I'm going to be talking about how in the future, it will be widely known and widely acknowledged, not just about the extraterrestrial presence here on Earth, but also there will be interaction with interdimensional beings. Mostly in the future, it'll be mostly neutral beings and higher vibrational beings, such as the celestials, which in the West are known as the angels, and in the East are known as the devas. And there are other very high vibrational beings that currently the Earth vibrates at too low of a frequency. I'm going to get into that. I always like to show that I have integrity on the show, and when I make mistakes or when I discover new information or information that perhaps is a good heads up for people, I always try and do that. And so, the Luciferians, they're extremely clever. They're extremely smart. And, a lot of people make the mistake because I'm so against the Molochians, and I'm going to be talking a lot, actually in the membership half about the Shadow War, which is going to be more in the members only half. I'm going to be talking about some of the very stark differences between the Luciferians and the Molochians, particularly around the harm of children. And so on that note alone, I do have a preference for the Luciferians to win the Shadow War, which they inevitably will. It's destiny. But don't ever mistake that for me thinking that they are straight shooters, that they're in any way fair, that they're anything less than completely ruthless. And an example of the way they're ruthless and treacherous, specifically with one of the Luciferian cryptocurrencies I talk about a lot in this channel is XRP. And I recently discovered how they plan to lock retail out of it. So I'm going to be talking about that. And then I'm going to be talking about some of the markers other than the X symbol, which I talk about in prior episodes in the Shadow Wars about the X symbol. And really, if you're not familiar with the Shadow Wars, some of this isn't going to make a lot of sense to you. And I really urge you to watch those. Nobody else out there is talking about this difference between Molochians and Luciferians that I'm aware of. And it's just so important to understanding what's happening in the world. And so if you're new to the channel, I highly recommend that come back and watch this. The live stream's always got a lot of juicy tidbits, but you really should watch the Shadow Wars, and I'm not going to go over that again. I'm just going to assume for the people who watch the show that they know the difference between those two. It's basically the difference between two different ruthless groups of elite, one of which is pure evil, the Molochians, who are basically Satanists, and then the other group is more like spiritual libertarians, but with a little bit of a tilting the tables in their favor attitude, or a lot of that actually. And so then I'm going to talk a little bit about an angelic prophecy that came through for the virtues. And then the bulk of that is going to be in the members only video, which will be in the second half. I haven't been able to move over to BitChute or Rumble yet for that. They eventually go up on Rumble, but they start out being on an unlisted YouTube video. And so in the second half, I'm going to be talking about the bulk of the angelic prophecy, which is part of the benefits of the patrons, is they get the once a month angelic prophecy. And so the bulk of that's going to be in the second half. All kinds of juicy stuff in that, hidden technology, secret societies that have been dormant for hundreds or thousands of years will be re-engaged. Perhaps potential extraterrestrial contact this summer. There's a lot of stuff in it. Some of it's going to be in here in the first half, in particular a key, what they call temporal marker date. And then there's going to be a lot of updates about the Shadow Wars, and in particular how that's playing out in a variety of geopolitical contexts. And that's going to be in the members only in the second half. Again, you can always join Patreon. And if you join today, you get a 2-for-1. You get tonight and next week's, and you can do it in the free trial. So I'm just going to go ahead and real quick do a little bit of clearinghouse. I think that I provide a lot of value in this channel. If you look at the back catalog, I have something like 180 videos. I'm always doing live streams. I'm always doing free content. Later this week, you're going to have part 1 of this incredible interview with Jennifer Curry. Jennifer Curry is she's really into tech, security tech, like what she calls white hat hacking. And also the new financial system that's emerging. Her and her husband are super into that. They're in the UK. She's probably most famous or infamous for she was Boris Johnson's mistress when he was still mayor of London, before he became foreign secretary and eventually prime minister of the UK. And she believes that he's either mind controlled or perhaps even a clone. And we're going to go into that in that free content that'll come out later this week. But if you're interested in supporting the channel and you want to get some of the really juicy stuff, I do suggest that you can join the Patreon and you can get access to the members only chat, which will be the second half of this. And then I just want to remind everyone, we have an Angelic Magic class coming up on July 11th, and also a Vedic astrology course, which is coming up on July 10th. There is limited amount of people that can join both the classes, but there's still quite a few openings left. And I have that for Oceania, Australia time zones. I do that about twice a year only. And first time ever EU and UK time zone for Angelic Magic. And then there's a East Coast friendly 4:30 p.m. start time, July 11th, Angelic Magic class. And then there's going to be the first ever introduction to Vedic astrology course. One of my specialties is Vedic astrology. So that's it with the advertisement stuff. Just a couple minutes in that. All right. So I want to talk to people about something that is very not well known, I would say. In fact, I'm not aware that anyone else talks about this as far as I know. And if it is, that would be amazing. And I would love to hear that, because that would then be what I like to call secondary confirmation. So I am blessed, although at times it's been a curse. It's definitely a double-edged sword. I'm blessed to be very psychic. Part of that comes from trauma that I suffered when I was younger. Certain kinds of trauma can open you up psychically. That's where Project Marionette, which eventually became MK Ultra, they learned that if you break someone's psyche through torture, and this can happen, accidentally as well for people who've had complex PTSD, but certain kinds of abuse can cause people to basically have an out-of-body experience in order to get away from the trauma their body's experiencing, especially if this happens as a child. And some of that can really amplify psychic ability. And so when I was younger, I was very badly abused, and that caused me to be quite psychic. And those gifts shut down when I was basically when the hormones hit, when I was about 17, or excuse me, not 17. No, it was much sooner than that. When I was about 12 was the last time I had really psychic experiences. But those gifts reawakened in my 20s after I read the Bhagavad Gita. And I also was trained by a Siberian lineage. He was actually from a Kamchatka lineage. That's that peninsula in extreme northeastern Russia. He was half Kamchatka lineage, totem pole making shamanic line, and he was half Inuit Eskimo. And so he taught me a lot about astral projection and astral realms, and also how to interact with certain spirits. And I'm able to interact with what are known as the Fae, among other beings. And so the Fae are talked about all throughout the world. There's different names for them in different cultures. They're known in the West usually as either the fae or the fairies, or sometimes the elves, for the particular class of spirits that I am referring to here today. And what I was told by the fae is that millions of years ago, there was a group of humans that were extremely psychically and magically gifted. And that group of humans was very, very interlinked with nature. And as we were moving through a descending Dwapara Yuga at that time, and about to go into the Kali Yuga, and the true horrors of the Kali Yuga were on the horizon, that group decided to use their magical abilities to seal themselves beyond the veil and to exist primarily in the basically silvery moonlight realm beyond the veil. Now, there's multiple veils. Some veils have to do with certain parts of the astral being able to interact with and see the astral realm. Some people believe that the veil will fall as part of the process of the apocalypse, and the apocalypse does not mean Armageddon or the end of the world. It instead means the great revealing. Some out there believe that part of what will happen in future events, perhaps in the angelic what they call the bottleneck event that's coming up in the future, and I don't have a date for that. I suspect it's sometime between 2025 and 2027. There's multiple things that are going to happen in that, but it could be that some of the veil that makes it so we can't see into the astral realm will thin or even be removed for some period of time, and we'll be able to interact with the astral in a very direct way. That won't require you to be phenomenally psychic to see it. However, the veil I'm referring to is sort of a sub-veil within that. And so there's sort of a pocket dimension that these beings have created. And they wish to escape the horrors of the world, and they thought that they'd be able to use their magic to help protect the woodland realms and the natural world with their magic on the other side of the veil, which can interact with the physical world that we exist in, because they found that they were often attacked by other groups of humans because of their psychic and magical abilities. And so they wanted to protect the natural realms while also protecting themselves, because they also were often hunted and being attacked, particularly during this descending process. And so they separated from us long, long ago. And what that did is it gave them extraordinarily long lives. And it also, to some degree, I don't want to say warped their mind, but it caused their thinking to be phenomenally alien to our way of thinking and viewing the world. They view things very differently than us, some of them. And so they can appear at times radically hostile, although that tends to be the darker fae, the ones who are, vibrating at, they're like us, they're free-willed beings. And so there's ones who, just like us, are most high aligned, sort of Luciferian, kind of neutral. And there's even dark fae who interact with the lower astral with their magic. They're very magical beings, and they have a huge impact, but their fate is very much tied to the land in which their particular kind of tribe is. Once in a great, great while, they will separate off and move to a new area and establish a new sort of kingdom, although actually it's really a queendom. The king in the Fae is not like a king in our world with patriarchy. They're much more a sort of matriarchal. The king just has a very specific purpose, but the queen, the fairy queen, will rule over her particular realm. And there's usually many, like here in Oregon, there's, I would imagine, probably dozens of realms that are ruled by various different fairy queens. And I've interacted with 3 of them. And one of them was very most high aligned, way down in Southern Oregon, on the California, Southern Oregon. Another one seems much more neutral, and she's much older, I guess, because they live thousands of years, because their lives have been extended by being on the veil, beyond the veil. And then there's one up in Mount Hood that, for whatever reason, she is much darker. And so the Fae, part of what happened to them being beyond the veil is it became very difficult for them to reproduce. And the more that they reproduce themselves beyond the veil, with each generation, they lost more and more ability to reproduce themselves. And so this is why there's so many ancient stories and legends about the Fae stealing babies or people wandering into a fairy ring or going into a mound and slipping into another dimension and being taken by the Fae. That is because they need humans in order to keep their breeding going. They need new genetic stock to mix with them. We can interbreed with them, and they need new genetic stock. This is very similar to what people say about the Greys. Some people say the Greys are some kind of talking about extraterrestrials now. Some people say the Greys are automatons, that they're completely like they're some kind of biomechanical robot that some other species use. Some people say that the mantis beings use them. Some people say the reptilians use them. And some people say, and this is my belief, that the majority of when people interact with the species known as the Grey, that what they're seeing is humans who've gone into a very sort of Molochian dark timeline where they have separated from source to such a great degree that in a similar vein to the Fae, they're unable to reproduce. Hence why there's so many stories about Greys opening women's abdomens, therefore taking eggs. Or you used to hear about all the, hick guys who'd be like, then they anally probe me. Well, that was a weird thing for the longest time until I found out, and this is really horrible, with cattle, in order to milk a bull of his semen, the fastest way to do that is to basically put something in the rectum of the male and stimulate the prostate at high speed. That's the fastest way for them to get semen to then go around and impregnate all the cows in order to produce calves, in order to produce milk, right? It's a very brutal and awful thing. And I'm actually going to be talking about environmentalism, true environmentalism, here in a minute. And to me, that's really brutal. That's interesting because although stories of the Greys talk about a similar thing, the men are anally probed and the women often talk about their abdomens being opened, and that's to remove ovum, right? It's to remove eggs. So it's to get semen and eggs, and they want that in order to be able to breed. So fairies have a similar issue, and so they ask, the higher aligned ones ask for people to voluntarily come beyond the veil, and the sort of neutral ones will sometimes trick children into coming across, and the dark ones will take people, both adults and children. So that is the origin of the beings known as the Fae. And there's a reason that I'm bringing up the Fae and elementals that I'm going to launch into here in just a second. So again, some of the Fae are very benevolent and wonderful. Some of them are quite neutral and sort of chaotic. All of them are quite alien in terms of their thinking. They just don't have anything like human morality. It's just like when you go to a different culture, right? And like in the Islamic world, you're not supposed to eat with your left hand or shake a hand with the left hand because the left hand is used to clean yourself after going to the bathroom. And therefore it's seen as the unclean hand, right? And so a left-handed person going to the Muslim world might run into some real problems. Now that's a minor cultural difference. We're talking about way beyond the difference between, say, the Portuguese and the Japanese when they met in the 1500s. We're talking about millions of years of cultural evolution of difference. They are very like us, but they're very, very different. And they're very attached to the land wherever they live. So then there's a class of spirits that are known as the elementals. So there are, according to Paracelsus, there are air elementals, which are known as sylphs. There are water elementals, which are known as undines. There are earth elementals, which he calls gnomes, right? There's other names, and there's additional classifications beyond this, but this is sort of like the broad umbrella groups for this. And then there are salamanders, which are the fire elementals. And we interact with the elementals way more than we realize. And a great example of this is if you go back and watch my interview with Peter Shampoo, he talks about enticing undine elementals through certain Native American, and they have different names for these beings, certain Native American groups through so-called rain dances and so forth, that he's even caused flash flooding. I believe it was in Los Angeles. The flip side of the coin is he says Burning Man hyperstimulates salamanders, and that very often after Burning Man, moving along ley lines, the salamanders will be extra chaotic and extra activated because all the chaotic energy and drug use at Burning Man, and of course the giant burning of the effigies and like a lot of fires going on, that if you trace those ley lines out, that's very often where you see the forest fires in Northern California and Southern Oregon, that it kind of branches out from these different ley lines. You should go watch that Peter Shampoo interview. It's very interesting. There's an ultra rare class that I just was told about, which is an ether elemental, and I have blanked. I blanked on the name. I believe it was Zydoflem was what they were called, but they're basically almost never seen outside of the astral. So why am I talking about elementals and the Fae? Well, elementals are very often deeply connected to the land, and they depend on it, and they're sentient beings. There's varying degrees of intelligence among elementals. Elementals tend to be not quite as intelligent or not nearly as intelligent as Fae, but they have a level of intelligence to where they're able to communicate and have a mind and have desires of their own and like quite a bit of autonomy. So they're free-willed beings. I would say they're at some kind of stage probably between primates and humans, whereas Fae are very much like humans, and they can have varying degrees of intellect, but because they live so long, they tend to have tremendous amounts of wisdom and knowledge that they've stored up and experienced, and they've seen a lot. Even younger Fae are often hundreds or thousands of years old, so they have tons of experience. Now, time operates very differently beyond the veil, and they're sometimes shocked when they interact with the physical world at how much change has happened, which brings me to true environmentalism. When I was younger, environmentalism, which I'm still consider myself an environmentalist, environmentalism was very much about, if you're a Gen Xer, you'll remember the phrase "save the whales." When I was a kid, and this is actually a heartening story, when I was a kid, bald eagles were on the verge of extinction, and so were blue whales. I remember as a kid driving for like 45 minutes outside of Portland to go to the Columbia Gorge, where there was a nesting pair of bald eagles. And people were parked for like a mile to see this nesting pair of bald eagles, because the nest was very easy to see because it was up in a dead tree. And the adults were hugging each other and crying because it had been nearly wiped out as the symbol of our country. And that's because of DDT, and it's the whole Rachel Carson Silent Spring thing. If you look at John Muir, who most people consider to be the founder of environmentalism, he talked about the devastation around Yosemite and wanting to start the national parks. And yeah, there's some stuff about Teddy Roosevelt and timber interests about how some of the forest management is done. But initially, the environmental movement was about protecting species, right? Like the bald eagle, which now has come back because we've got rid of DDT, cleaning up pollution or poisons like DDT, and protecting habitat, right? Like don't chop down the rainforest, right? When I was a kid, blue whales almost went extinct, and all it took was an internationally agreed upon moratorium on hunting blue whales, or agreement not to hunt them because they're the largest whale on Earth. And even magically Norway and Japan, who really have a taste for whale for some reason, agreed not to hunt them. And in the case of the bald eagle and the blue whales, nature came roaring back far beyond the most optimistic projections of environmentalists. Way better. And mostly it was just us taking the foot off the accelerator of destruction. Nowadays, environmentalism has been completely hijacked by CO2, 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 and nothing else. When I was a kid, there was a scare around the ozone layer. That didn't really take. In fact, when I was really young, there was a scare about how we were going into an ice age, which actually could be true. The Maunder minimum is underway, and we could actually be moving towards an ice age. That certainly seems more likely to me than that we're moving towards some kind of what began to get a little bit of traction when I was young was runaway greenhouse gas and a hole in the ozone layer. That then seemed to fade away. And then in the late 80s and early 90s, there was acid rain, and acid rain was going to destroy everything. But acid rain in the ozone layer seemed to be that they found that they got a little bit of traction with the people being afraid about runaway greenhouse gas and everything heating up. And they wanted to retool and work that through, right? Because all this happens after the report from Iron Mountain and the Club of Rome, the limits to growth, right? Which are, Venetian black nobility BS to control the population, much like Thomas Malthus and their concerns about coal, there being enough coal in England, right? Or that there would be so many horses, everything would run things over, and we needed to get rid of poor people, right? And actually, you can trace it to a defrocked Franciscan monk before Malthus who said we need to have limits to population growth. And we need that, right? Why? Because too many people hard to control. That was what it was really about. So we had this segue of the ozone layer hole, which seemed to go away, right? And then we had, and also people started slathering on sunscreen, which we now know causes skin cancer, right? Because of that, oh no, you'll get sunburn quick, slather on chemicals that will end up causing cancer, right? And then it became acid rain. Acid rain was going to wipe everything out. That's what they told me when a kid, just like AIDS was going to wipe everyone out unless people use condoms. Depopulation, right? Not to say, and Fauci and HIV, like look into that, right? So they then wanted to, in the 90s, bring in what they really wanted, which is the CO2 narrative. CO2 footprint. It's your fault, little person. Eat the bugs, right? Meanwhile, you have John Kerry, the Obamas, Bill Gates buying waterfront, 10, 20, 30, $100 million mansions, right? Not the actions of people who think that it's going to be underwater. You have Leo DiCaprio renting mega yachts every summer, right? And then you have mega yachts and private jets being exempted in the European Union Green New Deal type thing. I forget what it's called, but their green environmental plan, it exempted private jets and yachts. And yachts and cruises are the biggest emitters of carbon by far. And the biggest of all is the Pentagon. And you never hear these people talking about closing down military bases to protect the environment. It's always about how we need to not eat as much meat, right? We need to drive an electric vehicle, right? All this stuff. CO2 is a bait and switch to get people off of real environmentalism. So right near me, there's a beautiful forest that I walk in all the time with my family that I love very much. And they're going to chop a bunch of it down. And I have connected with the Fae there, and they have asked me to Lorax style speak for the trees. And I just want to remind everyone, you can be against this CO2 global warming thing, and you can see how that's a globalist plot. But please remember, the environment does matter. If you're someone who's, a hunter, look at Ducks Unlimited. They realized they had to protect wetlands because all the wetlands were getting drained, and they wanted to be able to hunt ducks. And now they're some of the biggest stewards of wetlands and one of the biggest groups advocating for it. We have a need for natural spaces, and the planet has a need for natural spaces. And I just want to remind everyone that there is a form of environmentalism that traces even back to the Bible and how we were put here in part to tend to the garden, and that we need to start doing that again because we've really lost our way. And now environmentalism has been completely taken over by the CO2 Trojan horse, Greta Thunberg, Davos, electric vehicle bullshit. And so we need to realize that there's actually beings that are at the same level of intelligence as us, that their existence is threatened by the wiping out of these natural spaces, both these elementals, but also the Fae. The Fae will fade and wither and die because they're connected to the land in that area. And tons of Fae have been wiped out. It's been a genocide for centuries now. And because most people can't see through the veil or interact with these spirits, we have just been wiping out these natural spaces. And I just want to encourage and urge everyone to look in their heart and think about whether we want to continue this obliteration of forests. I'm all for using wood and sustainable being the key word, sustainable harvesting. But we need to protect the ancient forests. They cannot be chopped. They have rhizomes and fungal matter at the roots that allow the trees to become those ancient old growth forests that only are found in the old growth forest. We've got to protect the last of the old growth. And we need to be more sustainable in the way in which we interact with these forests. And in the future, we'll be able to interact with these interdimensional beings, and they will be able to help us have a much more reasonable forest management plan. And in many ways, a lot of this is just going to work itself out. But I just felt really moved by that. I actually am quite sad about it. I'm trying not to get really upset about it. But I just really want to call upon people, if there's beautiful, especially old growth forests near you, please do lobby to protect it. Please do give to real environmental organizations. Like I give to the Wild Salmon Network as part of the charitable works I do that the angels asked me to do. And so I just wanted to speak on behalf of that. Now, in the interest of being honest, right? And that I'm always going to try and be honest with you to the best of my ability about things that I know. I talk a lot on this channel about the upcoming Luciferian financial system that's taking over from the old Molochian system, right? And the Luciferians are not to be trusted. You need to understand that the Luciferians are ruthless in the same way the Molochians are. They're very clever and they don't have your best interests at heart. But they're going to let intelligent people get savvy to their plans, because if you're smart enough to figure out what they're doing, they want you on board, and they want you as sort of foot soldiers who will advocate for their new system, who will believe in their new narrative, and who will tell their family, look, I tried to tell you about what the Molochians were doing, all the pedo stuff in schools, the trash DEI, CEI stuff coming out of Disney and Hollywood, all this kind of social engineering crap, the fake CO2 nonsense, all that stuff, right? They want us to understand that because they want us to support them when they take over. And they want that in the financial system as well. So I often talk about how I was told by the angels, I believe it was in 2022, you can go back and look, that there would be it might have been 2023 even, that the new Luciferian financial system would prominently feature XRP and XLM specifically. Now, I had gotten mega burned in 2021. I happened to get a large tax refund right at the tippy top of the 2021 crypto summer, right before the crypto winter that we're just now coming out of. And I lost thousands. I got almost wiped out. I did buy a little bit of XLM because something about it resonated with me. Not that I thought it was good, but that I thought it was going to be a winner somehow. And I didn't have a lot of the gnosis that's come to me through the angels now. But so I knew what XOM was. But at that time, XRP was not tradable because of the SEC lawsuit. So when the angels said XRP and XOM, I was like, well, I know what XOM is, but what the hell is XRP? And they said, it'll be at the center of the Luciferian system. XRP will be for the wealthy and international trade, and XOM will be for retail trade. And I was like, what the hell? And I since have looked into it, and this seems to be true. Now, I want to be clear. A lot of people think that I'm therefore saying, oh, I support XRP. It's some great thing. It's going to be liberating of humanity. It's going to really help people. No, I don't think that at all. I do think it will be comparatively liberating to the Molochian system, but it will have plenty of hooks attached. And I just discovered something very, very important about it. And that is the plan that the Lucies have to clear out retail XRP holders. So there is code, right? Because their code's publicly available. And if you go to XRP Ledger, they talk about this in the coding. And there's a video which I'll try and link in the description after, where a guy goes into the details, right? But basically, they can change the maximum fee values and account reserve, but only up to a point. So the account reserve is the minimum you need to have in a wallet in order for it to be able to send and receive XRP. And if you go below that minimum, which currently I believe is 2 XRP, it used to be 1 XRP, but they've doubled it to 2 XRP, right? All the validators, which are controlled by the whales, agreed, right? They can change that number. And they have a hard cap on that number, an upper limit of 4,294 XRP. Well, you might say, well, that's not that much, Ian. That's only $2,150, right? And that's correct. It is, pretty much exactly. So 2,149, I think, is the specific number in dollars, right? Because it's about 50 cents right now. Well, consider if there is the long storied, according to the Riddlers, which is the XRP Riddlers, which is very similar to the 17th letter of the alphabet, and Luciferian propaganda, where they drop truth and they drop lies and they put on information and revelation of the method to see if the savvy people can sort through it and join the winning team. Because they want people who are sophisticated and savvy and who can kind of crack the code, so to speak. And so they do this weird Riddler thing. There's this bearable guy 123, which a lot of people think, and I am among them, as actually the CTO of Ripple, David Schwartz. I think that he runs the bearable guy 123 Riddler thing, or someone else, perhaps the mysterious Arthur Brito, who also made the XRPL ledger. I have been told by insiders, people who operate at higher levels, that indeed some significant portion of the new financial system's rails for payments is going to be XRP. But consider, if you get the so-called long-awaited God candle and XRP goes up to $10 in XRP, well, suddenly you need to invest $40,000 to have a wallet that can be viable. And in fact, you have to have a $40,000 reserve in order to send out XRP. What if it's at $100, right? Now you need $400,000 in reserve to be part of that. What if it's $10,000? That's $4 million in reserve. That effectively prices out retail. People complain all the time, oh, XRP is doing this sideways thing. It's because they're attempting to get back as much as they can from retail. Every time the price crashes, the whales accumulate more. And they want to price out retail. So I want to say to viewers of mine, and again, I've constantly said it's not financial advice. I'm just sharing with you what Angel said. I saw this and it raised my concern in the sense that if you're not going to have way more than that, you need to consider that the wallet could be frozen. Now, what that means is you would apparently be able to sell it. I think back to Ripple, I'm not sure, or perhaps certain validators, but you probably would have to take a big haircut on it and you wouldn't be able to send any more XRP. It would be stuck there unless you sold it back to one of these authorized buyers at probably a huge discount. You'd probably still get a lot of gains, right? But you'd get at a huge discount. So I just want to let everyone know that because I just discovered this. It's something that's only been recently discovered and made public, but this seems to be the Luciferians' plan, tilting that table, stacking that deck, marking those cards to screw over retail. So if you're going to be invested in it, you're going to need to have an amount that exceeds, probably well exceeds 4,294. And if that's out of your reach, you may want to shift over to XOM, or as I often say, you should always have, if your investment, you have food and water, right? Because I'm going to talk about angelic prophecy very shortly. Get that food, water, and medicine in place right now, okay? Once you have that, a few months worth, at least 3 months of those, then you can look at investing, and then your first investment should be gold and silver. And by the way, you may need point-and-click technology, ding, to protect your property during a period of chaos, right? That's another thing you really need to consider, right? Having gasoline that can last. There's this stuff called, oh gosh, I forget. The gasoline actually goes bad after a while. A lot of people don't know that. So there's a certain thing you can put in, gosh, I can't remember what it's called. There's an episode a while back where I talk about all the stuff of sort of prepper type stuff, but there's some kind of preservative that you can put in gasoline that can make it last 2 years. Having a few jerry cans of that, so in case like gasoline gets cut off for some period of time. Once you have all of that in place, right? And of course, community is super important. Skill building is super important, right? Once you have all of that in place, then be sure you have gold and silver as your basis for any kind of investment. If you're fortunate enough to be really well heeled, you know, good agricultural properties are going to do very well. They might lose value for some period of time on paper, but in the long run, they'll be extremely valuable because it always is, right? If you're wanting to do super high risk investing, you might want to consider XRP and XOM, in which case probably XOM, I'm not familiar with any such limit that XOM has, although that may exist as well. But XRP could easily reach this cap of 4,294 XRP minimum reserve. And so I want everyone to be aware of that. And I will say again, on paper, Bitcoin seems much better. It's more decentralized and so forth, all this kind of stuff. Well, yes, and also no. There is a lot of evidence that points towards that Bitcoin comes out of the NSA and that it was put in place to deal with the fact that the dollar was going to be dethroned. And that doesn't mean that you shouldn't hold any Bitcoin. I personally do not. I always try and make it clear where my investments are. I'm invested in ISO 222 compliant coins because that's what my research based on that tip the angels gave me has led me to believe is going to be at the center of the new financial system. There will be other crypto, blockchain, technology stuff that has to do with Web 3.0 and all kinds of things like that that will probably far outpace what these ISO 222 coins will give you. There'll be, the Amazon and Google and Netflix and Facebook type things of the future, but I don't know what those things are. I don't understand it well enough. So I try and stick with my investing with what I understand. And I understand this ISO 222 system. And I believe, again, not financial advice, I believe that it's going to be at the center based on what the angel said to me. Now, Jennifer Curry, who I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I did an interview with her, and she talks a lot about DeFi. She also talks about Boris Johnson potentially being a clone in part 2. Very interesting stuff, and her real world experience with him that makes her believe that. But she talks quite a bit about DeFi, and her husband was in Bitcoin when it was at $75, I believe she said, was when he first got in. He was doing mining rigs that would catch on fire. She also really works with the cybersecurity folks there in the UK, and that particular interview goes into things a lot more. I also recommend Black Swan Capitalist. A lot of people don't like it when I talk about XRP. Look, again, we can disagree on things. You should not just take everything I say on this channel at face value. Take what resonates and leave the rest. Always, always, always do your own research. Always, always, always do what makes sense for you and for your family, and what resonates with you is true. And if you think I'm wrong on this, hey, that's totally fine. You can strongly disagree with me on that, and Godspeed, and I hope you do well. I'm just sharing with you my perspective. And if it doesn't resonate with you, please, please, please listen to your own intuition, always above me or some person on YouTube or so-called experts or whatever. And always do your own diligence, especially with investing where your family's future might be on the line. All right, so then angelic prophecy. Boom, got it real quick. I accidentally closed the screen, as Ian is wont to do. Hang on a second. Give me just a second, folks. My apologies. I just need to pull this up real quick. Gosh darn it. I did not mean to close that screen. My apologies, folks. Give me just a minute here. Okay, I think it's in my main account then. My apologies. This will be worth the wait, though. There's just a little bit here for this time. So I'm just going to read word for word what came through from the virtues. Now, this is a small snippet of a much larger portion. This is about 10% of it, and about 90% is going to be in the second half for paid members. Again, you can do 1 week free trial with Patreon. If you sign up today, you'll get today's for free, and you'll get next Friday's. Normally, these are done on Friday. Just something wonderful actually came up for me personally that I had to attend to on Friday. That's why we're doing it on Saturday. So I cut out a little bit of preamble here. And so the virtues said as follows, and some of it might feel a little bit chunky, and it's because I'm taking sections out. So they said, as the months heat up, there shall be a need for the Molochians to release chaos into the streets of American cities. This shall involve explosions of BOMBs and other terrorist attacks. In Texas, Oklahoma, and Missouri, the major cities of those states are dangerous. On the East Coast in particular, major cities will be dangerous. Large cities shall therefore be avoided. Also, I believe that they showed me, but it didn't come through as words, also that major cities in California and on the West Coast may be affected as well. So therefore, this is across the United States, but especially in those areas. Large cities shall therefore be avoided when they can, especially large gatherings and protests, which will be the most dangerous. Do not take your children to large protests or gatherings. Please be careful out there. They hammered this following date home again and again and again, and I was very puzzled by it, but I'll explain what it alludes to here in a moment. July 11th shall be an important day, and there will be world-changing historical events that shall occur, some of which shall be positive, some of which shall be negative, not all of which will be reported. This will happen largely abroad, therefore outside of the United States. One event in particular shall happen in the United States. This shall be a good event, though it shall be underreported. It may also look bad initially. Look carefully in the United States and you will find it. They said something about a golden shoehorn. That is something being compressed into a tiny space that shall be positive and hold within it great hope. This is the event to look for. So cutting way ahead. This is super interesting. From Earth and also from off-world, meaning ships that originate on Earth and also from off-world. From Earth and also from off-world, more ships will be sighted, including over capitals. This is sometime in the next 6 months. And there may be a plan for some ships, likely Earth ships, to reveal themselves during the Olympic Games in Paris. If that happens, you guys, I am going to retire forever as champion because that is a wild call. I'm just putting it out there. The Angels are very insistent. I always get camera shy to share this stuff, but I really wanted to. The July 11th, I'm pretty sure about. They said July 11th is a temporal marker. From that day forward, the intensity of the chaos shall increase manyfold. Artificial hurricanes shall be used among other weather weaponry. They shall be used to punish Florida and Texas in particular. People in these states should be prepared with food, water, and medicine. So I was like, July 11th, and I typed it in. July 11th, July 11th, July 11th, nothing. I was like, is that the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games? No, that happens later in July. I was like, what is it? What is on July 11th? What is on July 11th? I couldn't find anything. I researched for quite a while. And then the next day after I did this prophecy, I get an Epoch Times thing to my mailbox, and it's talking about Trump's vice presidential pick. And it said, he's going to do that at the RNC, the Republican National Convention. And I was like, yeah, okay. And I was just reading because I'm really curious if he's going to choose Tulsi Gabbard or Vivek Ramaswamy or maybe I think it's Tim Scott. Any of those I think would be a great choice. There might be some other ones I haven't considered. I think any of those would be a great and really interesting choice. Tulsi Gabbard is my favorite of those three, although I don't entirely trust her or any of these Luciferians, let me be clear, including Big Daddy Trump, right? But guess what? The article then says his arraignment or whatever, the thing where they decide whether he's going to get jail time for the Stormy Daniels hush money, July 11th. I was like, when I read that. So the golden shoehorn, something that's compressed into a tiny space that shall be positive and hold within it great hope, right? Think about it. It's great hope on the surface for the Molochians, but it's great hope in reality for the Luciferians because, as I've said several times, jailing Trump, right? Arresting and jailing Trump or canceling the election, right? Or unaliving one of his doubles or possibly clones would be the checkmate moment where the Luciferians had the Molochians. Because the Luciferians don't need to win the election in the fall. They've already got that taken care of. What they need is some kind of major overreaction by the Molochians that would justify them when they get in power doing the mass arrests in the Nuremberg 2.0. Okay, so that is it. I am not answering any questions. Someone reported this. Well, whatever. I don't care. That's weird that someone reported this. I don't know how you know that, Meow. Maybe you can expand that a little bit. Expand on that a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and end this. Again, if you'd like to see part 2 where the vast majority of the angelic prophecy and some Shadow Wars stuff that's geopolitical in nature. Again, I read maybe 20% of this prophecy. About 80% is going to be in the second half. Stuff like secret societies, more specifics on things that are going to happen. I put out the stuff so people can be safe, but there's more specifics about it. Hidden technologies, some really interesting stuff that is like, whoa, is going to be in that. And then there's going to be talking about some geopolitical stuff going on with the Shadow Wars that's going to be in part 2, you can go to the Patreon, and Moderator L, if you're able to hear this, Moderator L is just too fast. She already has it up. If you want to, you can join for free, 1 week trial, and you'll get today's and next week's free. Also, if you're interested in the Angelic Magic classes or the Vedic Astrology class, once those classes start, you will, for the 7 or 8 weeks, you'll get 2 months worth of the members only videos for free, included in those classes. That's something I'm doing for all of my Angelic Magic and also Vedic Astrology students. So it's a little bonus in there. There might be additional bonus. I forgot to wear it, but there's now some White Lotus of Light swag. If people are interested, there's some hoodies and shirts. Right now it's just black with the White Lotus of Light symbol across it. So if that interests you, that'll be available on the website pretty soon. And if you're interested in those classes, go to whitelotusoflight.com. And thank you so much for watching. And we will be starting the members only live stream here in about 5 or 10 minutes. And I'll be answering Q&A on that. I just didn't have time because this one's gone over 45 minutes. So, all right. And for everyone else, I'll see you next week. And look for that Jennifer Curry interview. It's going to be, it's a big one. Really interesting. Boris Johnson, was he a clone or is he a clone? Crazy. All right. See you guys soon. Bye.